pulled! Charge forward! Push us back!
Two men, one holy city. The greatest war of the 12th century. On one side, Saladin, the great unifier of the Muslim world. The tactical genius who had annihilated the Crusader army at Hattin and reclaimed Jerusalem for Islam. On the other, a man who was more myth than mortal. A king who was a warrior first, a politician second. A man whose personal sigil, the three-crested lion, was a perfect symbol of his own nature. Proud, ferocious, and unbound. We call him Richard the Lionheart. This was not just a war of faith. It was a personal duel between the two greatest commanders on earth. It was the Third Crusade, and on a dusty road near a town called Arsuf, it would climax in one of the most brilliant, brutal, and strategically vital battles of the medieval age. A perfect, desperate clash of civilizations that played out just like a high-stakes total war campaign. To understand the Third Crusade, you must first understand the catastrophe that birthed it. In 1187, at the Battle of Hattin, Saladin inflicted the single most devastating defeat the Crusader states had ever suffered. He drew the entire army of the Kingdom of Jerusalem into a waterless trap and annihilated it. The true cross, Christendom's most sacred relic, was captured. The King of Jerusalem was a prisoner. The Templar and Hospitaller Knights were executed en masse. In the months that followed, Saladin's victory was total. He recaptured city after city, culminating in the fall of Jerusalem itself. When the news reached Europe, it was a shockwave of spiritual and existential horror. The Pope called for a new crusade, a crusade of kings, to reclaim the holy city. This would be the largest, best-funded, and most star-studded Crusader expedition in history. It was led by the three most powerful monarchs in Europe. First, the aged but legendary Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick Barbarossa, who led a massive German army overland, only to tragically drown in a river in Anatolia, causing his army to disintegrate. Second, the calculating and political Philip II of France. And third, the new King of England, Richard I, known to history as Coeur de Lion, the Lionheart. Richard was, by every account, a military genius. He had spent his entire life at war, fighting his own brothers and his father. He was a brilliant logistician, a master tactician, and one of the most terrifying personal combatants alive. But he was also arrogant, ruthless, and had the political subtlety of a battering ram. He and Philip were bitter rivals, and their target, Saladin, was the most powerful and respected ruler the Muslim world had seen in generations. The stage was set for a true clash of titans. Richard did not sail straight for the Holy Land. In a move of strategic genius, he first secured his supply lines by conquering Sicily, and then, after being insulted, conquering the entire island of Cyprus. This gave him a vital forward base and a treasury to fund his war. When he finally arrived in the Holy Land in June 1191, he found a scene of utter desperation. The Crusader army, led by King Guy of Lusignan, the loser from Hattin, and Philip of France, was bogged down in a brutal 2-year siege of the port city of Acre. But it was a siege in reverse. The Crusaders were besieging the Muslim garrison inside Acre, while Saladin's main army was encamped outside the Crusader camp, besieging them. It was a miserable, disease-ridden, chaotic stalemate, a true Meatgrinder, where both sides were being bled white.
Push it forward! Bring the tower to the walls now, men! Faster!
Richard's arrival was like a bolt of lightning. He brought energy, money, fresh troops, and, most importantly, enormous siege engines he had built and brought with him, including massive trebuchets nicknamed Bad Neighbor and God's Own Stone Thrower. He took command of the entire operation. He was everywhere directing the sappers, aiming the engines, and even fighting in the trenches himself, despite being struck down with a severe fever. His presence electrified the Crusader army and demoralized the garrison. Under this relentless, 24-hour-a-day assault, the walls of Acre were finally breached. On July 12, 1191, the city surrendered. It was a massive victory. The Crusaders finally had a deep-water port and a capital for their rump kingdom. But what happened next defines Richard's brutal pragmatism. The surrender terms included a prisoner exchange and a large payment of gold from Saladin. Saladin, for various reasons, delayed. He was prevaricating, attempting to stall. Richard, encumbered by 2,700 prisoners and needing to move his army south immediately, saw this as a breach of the treaty. He could not march with 2,700 hostages, nor could he spare the men to guard them. He made a cold, terrible calculation. On August 20th, he ordered every single prisoner, men, women, and children, to be marched outside the city and executed in full view of Saladin's horrified army. It was a cold-blooded massacre, an act of sheer, calculated terror. Richard was sending a message. He was not his predecessors. He was here to win, at any cost. With Acre secured, the objective was clear: Jaffa. This was the port city closest to Jerusalem. To take Jerusalem, Richard had to first take Jaffa, but between him and Jaffa lay 70 miles of hostile territory, under a burning August sun, all while Saladin's entire, undefeated field army shadowed his every move. This march would be the ultimate test of Richard's generalship. He knew Saladin's total war strategy: avoid a pitched battle at all costs. Instead, use his swarms of mobile Turkish horse archers to harass, to goad, to bleed the Crusader army, to pick off stragglers, and to inflict death by 1,000 cuts into the heavily armored knights, maddened by heat and thirst. Broke formation in a foolish, disorganized charge. Then, and only then, would Saladin's heavy Mamluk cavalry countercharge and annihilate them. It was the exact tactic that had worked at Hattin. Richard would not allow it. He devised a new formation, a masterpiece of tactical discipline. He created a walking fortress. The army marched in a tight, rectangular column. On the landward side, exposed to Saladin, was the infantry. Thousands of spearmen formed a moving wall of shields and steel. Between them and behind them were the crossbowmen. The crossbow, with its immense power and range, was the perfect counter to the Turkish composite bow. In the very center of the column, protected from the endless rain of arrows, rode the precious heavy cavalry, the English and French knights, and the elite Templars and Hospitallers. The army's right flank was protected by the sea, where Richard's supply fleet sailed alongside them, meaning they would never run out of food or water. Their orders were simple and absolute: do not break formation, do not charge, no matter what.
30,000 warriors of Islam stand against the Crusader forces. The Lionheart faces his greatest challenge against the might of Saladin.
4 days, Saladin threw everything he had at this walking box. His horse archers would gallop in, fire a volley, and wheel away, screaming insults. His Sudanese infantry would charge out of the scrubland, hurl javelins, and clash with the spearmen before melting away. The heat was suffocating. The noise was constant. Men and horses were falling, struck by arrows. The Crusaders, particularly the hot-blooded knights, were reaching a breaking point. They were warriors, bred for the glorious, decisive charge, and Richard was forcing them to be a walking anvil. The tension was becoming unbearable. On September 7, 1191, near the town of Arsuf, Saladin decided the time was right for an allowed assault. He committed his entire army, seeking to break the column. He concentrated his attack on the rear, which was held by the Knights Hospitaller, the most disciplined and ferocious of all the military orders. For hours, the Hospitallers endured a living hell. They were swarmed from all sides. Their horses, which were not as well armored as the knights, were being killed beneath them, rendering the knights helpless. They were being goaded, taunted, and pincushioned. The Hospitaller Grand Master rode to Richard, begging for the signal to countercharge. Richard refused. "Hold the line," he commanded. "The time is not yet. We will charge as one." He was waiting for the perfect moment, when Saladin's army was fully committed and bunched together for a single, decisive, all-or-nothing blow. But the Hospitallers broke. They could not take it. 2 knights, the Marshal of the Order and a knight named Garnier de Nobles, screaming in defiance, suddenly spurred their horses and charged without the order. In that instant, the entire Third Crusade, the fate of the Holy Land, hung in the balance. This was exactly the disorganized, piecemeal charge Saladin had been praying for. This was Hattin all over again. But as the other Hospitallers, seeing their leaders go, instinctively charged with them, Richard the Lionheart demonstrated his true genius. He was not a man who panicked. He was a man who adapted, he saw the disaster, and in a fraction of a second, he turned it into the massacre. His plan was ruined, so he made a new one. Instead of trying to stop the unstoppable, he unleashed it. He roared the order, and the 6 signal trumpets along the entire 2-mile line of the army blared the one single note for charge. The walking fortress split apart. From the center of the column, the entire heavy cavalry of the Crusader army, thousands of English knights, French knights, and the Templars in the front erupted like a coiled spring. This was the moment they had lived for. This was the most devastating weapon of the medieval world, a full-strength, organized, and fresh charge by European heavy knights. It was a hammer blow that Saladin's army, which was a light, mobile, harassment force, was utterly unprepared for. The charge of the Crusader Knights was not a series of individual duels. It was a single, 1,000-ton shock weapon. It didn't just break Saladin's line, it disintegrated it. The Ayyubid army, which had been so confident moments before, was shattered, routed, and sent fleeing in terror. Saladin himself, trying to rally his men, was almost captured. He had been completely and totally outgeneraled and defeated in the open field. Richard, ever the tactician, showed incredible discipline. He did not allow his knights to pursue their route where they could be scattered and picked off. He ordered them to halt, reform, and return to the line. Saladin counterattacked twice more, and twice more, he was broken by a disciplined charge. By nightfall, the field belonged to Richard. The Battle of Arsuf was a total, crushing, and legendary victory. Arsuf was a total war victory in every sense. It shattered Saladin's aura of invincibility. It proved that in an open, pitched battle, his mobile army could not stand against Richard's disciplined heavy shock tactics. The victory secured the road to Jaffa, which fell to Richard soon after. The Crusaders now had their staging ground for the final assault on Jerusalem. But here, Richard's story turns from one of military triumph to one of political tragedy. As he marched inland just 12 miles from Jerusalem, he stopped. He had won the battles, but he knew he was losing the war. He realized that even if he could capture Jerusalem, he could not hold it. The Crusader army was melting away. Philip of France had already packed up and gone home to try and steal Richard's lands. The other lords were exhausted. Once Richard left, Saladin would simply return and retake the city. Richard, in an agony of frustration, famously shielded his eyes, saying he was unworthy to look upon the city he could not save.
Forward for the king! Run back! Hold the line!
His crusade had one last, brilliant flash of heroism. Saladin, seeing Richard's weakness, launched a surprise counterattack on Jaffa. Richard, who was up the coast, sailed back with a tiny force, jumped into the surf in his boots, and led a desperate charge of a few knights and crossbowmen to retake the city. He held the beach, fighting on foot, against Saladin's entire army. It was an act of personal bravery, so astonishing that even Saladin's brother allegedly sent him 2 fresh horses, saying a man so noble should not be fighting on foot. This final battle led to a stalemate. The 2 greatest warriors of their age, having tested each other to the limit, realized neither could fully destroy the other. In the end, Richard the Lionheart did not take Jerusalem. The Third Crusade ended not with a bang, but with a treaty. In 1192, Richard and Saladin signed the Treaty of Jaffa. The Crusader states would be re-established as a secure, if small, kingdom along the coast. Acre would be its capital. Most importantly, Saladin, while keeping Jerusalem, agreed to allow unarmed Christian pilgrims to enter the city and pray freely at the holy sites. Richard, the ultimate warrior, had achieved a political compromise. He had saved the Crusader states from the total annihilation of 1187 and had given them another century of life. Saladin, the great unifier, had held Jerusalem, the ultimate prize. The 2 men, who had never met, had developed a profound, chivalrous respect for one another. Richard sailed for home, only to be shipwrecked and imprisoned, a final tragic chapter in his story. He remains a total war legend, an unmatched battlefield commander, a tactical genius, and a warrior king whose personal bravery and brutality echoed through the ages.
From the fields of Gaul to the walls of Constantinople,
we explore the conflicts that forged empires.
Richard's victory at Arsuf was a masterclass in tactics, but it didn't win the war. And the peace he signed was, for many, a bitter disappointment. It led directly to one of the most bizarre and tragic expeditions in history, the Fourth Crusade. If you want to know what happened when the next crusade went completely off the rails and instead of fighting Saladin, ended up sacking the Christian city of Constantinople, let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Total War history.